The truck's brakes screamed against the gravel as it jerked to a stop, kicking a cloud of dust into the sun-bleached air. The base beyond the gate looked like every rumor promised: bleak, loud, unforgiving. Fort Helridge was not a place people arrived at by accident. The chain-link fences shimmered with heat, the guard tower silhouettes cutting the skyline like sharpened blades. It smelled of fuel, iron, and tension. Mara Ellison stepped down from the truck's tailgate, her boots hitting the ground with a soft thud that no one heard. Her uniform was too big at the shoulders, the color faded from more washes than regulation allowed. The duffel bag on her back sagged with the kind of weight that wasn't just fabric and metal. Her hair, tied low, caught a bit of the wind before settling flat against her neck. Around her, recruits filed out, all noise and swagger, their laughter scraping against the silence she carried like armor. The sergeant at the checkpoint scanned the group, then pointed at her. Name. Mara Ellison, she said, voice even but quiet. He squinted at his clipboard, then at her. Volunteer Corps, huh? Thought that program got shut down. Not yet, sir. He let the paper drop, his tone halfway between a sneer and a joke. You'll last a week, maybe. Mara nodded once, as if he'd just given her a schedule instead of an insult, then walked on. The base swallowed her up rows of concrete barracks, shouts echoing from a nearby obstacle course, boots slamming rhythm into the dust. Inside the mess hall, the air smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. Every table was full except one, the empty one in the corner where the new and the unwanted Saturday. She ate there without looking up, her fork moving slow, her posture straight. In the barracks, the walls were lined with bunks that looked welded out of punishment. She was assigned bottom rack near the window. Riley, the self-appointed leader of the recruits, looked her over as she dropped her duffel beside the bed. You lost, sweetheart? He said, his grin sharp. This isn't the volunteer soup line. The others chuckled. Mara just met his eyes for a heartbeat, then went back to untying her boots. The silence after that was heavier than any comeback she could have given. Night settled in fast. The barracks lights buzzed overhead, flickering as the wind picked up outside. Someone snored. Someone cursed at the cold. Mara lay still for a while, then sat up, pulled the duffel closer, and rested a hand on it like it might run away. When the lights cut off completely, a spring in her bunk gave out with a metallic crack. The bed sagged under her weight. Laughter exploded from the other side of the room. Guest supply forgot to reinforce the volunteer bunk, Riley called out. A few joined in. Mara said nothing. She got up, bare feet on the cold floor, found the toolbox by the wall, and started to fix it. No huff, no complaint. Just steady movements, bolt, washer, twist, tighten. The laughter faded, replaced by the quiet creak of metal as she rebuilt the frame piece by piece. When she finished, she sat down again, her back straight, eyes forward. Outside, a transport convoy rolled past, its headlights sweeping over her face for a split-second calm, unreadable, the kind of calm that doesn't belong to rookies. The others turned over in their bunks, muttering about the cold or the schedule or the next day's drills, but none of them noticed that Mara didn't sleep. She sat in the dark with her hands folded on her knees, listening to the hum of the bass through the thin barracks walls, the low growl of engines, the whistle of the wind across the wire. The distant bark of an officer's order. It was a sound she already knew too well, the sound of a place that eats the unready. Mara didn't flinch. She just waited, her expression still and calm, like someone who'd already decided exactly how long she'd last, and it wasn't a week. By the end of her first week at Fort Helridge, Mara Ellison had learned two things. Silence was louder than noise, and the quiet ones always drew fire. Her name had already become a kind of joke in the barracks, a whisper traded over late-night cigarettes and boot polish, charity case, officer's niece, ghost recruit. Every story contradicted the last, but they all agreed on one thing: she didn't belong. Mara didn't fight it. She ran when she was told to run, lifted what they told her to lift, spoke only when she had to. Her eyes stayed forward, her boots steady, her hands folded when they weren't working. That stillness drove people mad. It wasn't submission, it was something colder, heavier, like she was just waiting for everyone else to tire out. Sergeant Voss noticed it too. Tall, wire-thin, with a voice that carried like barbed wire through fog, he made a habit of breaking recruits down in front of the others. "No ghosts in my platoon," he liked to say. "If I can't read you, I'll find a way to." And that morning, during the gear inspection, he decided it was Mara's turn. The squad stood lined up in the training yard, boots aligned, duffels at their feet. The sun hadn't even cleared the eastern ridge, but sweat already beaded down necks. Voss paced the line, barking questions, kicking open bags, tossing gear into the dirt just to watch people scramble. When he reached Mara, he stopped. She stood at attention, her duffel perfectly zipped, the strap wrapped around her hand like she was anchoring herself. "Ellison," he said, circling her like a hawk that smelled weakness. "Heard a lot about you. No one seems to know how you got here." She didn't look up. "Through the application process, sir." That earned a laugh from Riley somewhere down the line. Voss's grin was all teeth. "Cute. Tell you what, since you've got nothing to hide, dump the bag." Her fingers twitched once, that was all. But Voss saw it that single flicker before she knelt and unzipped it. He didn't wait. He snatched the bag from her hands and turned it upside down. The sound was small but cruel, the flap hitting dirt, the contents spilling in a lifeless heap. Out came a battered notebook, a toothbrush wrapped in tissue, a half-eaten granola bar, a pair of socks tied with string. An old photo slipped free, landing face up in the dust. A man in a formal uniform, his arm around a girl who looked younger, smiling in a way Mara no longer could. Someone in the line snorted. "What, no makeup?" Another added. "Guess volunteers travel light." Voss crouched, rummaging through the mess until his hand brushed a rectangular shape wrapped in clear plastic. "What's this?" he muttered. He tore the wrapping open and pulled it free. The laughter stopped. The cloth unfurled like a flag-catching wind-deep navy wool, creased in perfect symmetry, its epaulets heavy with stars. 4 of them. The ribbons gleamed under the morning Sunday. The nameplate shone like a mirror. Asterisk, asterisk, Ellison. Asterisk, asterisk. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even the gulls circling above the compound seemed to vanish. Voss's smirk faltered. "Where'd you get this?" His voice was quieter now, almost careful. Mara looked straight ahead. "It was my father's, sir." A ripple moved through the line. One of the recruits whispered, "Ellison, as in?" He didn't finish. Everyone had heard the name somewhere. General Isaac Ellison. Operation Kestrel. The mountain campaign no one talked about but everyone remembered. The man who'd walked his unit through hell and never walked back out. Voss's throat worked as he looked down at the uniform, his gloved hands trembling slightly. The insignia caught the light, and for a moment it wasn't fabric, it was memory. "Why do you have this?" he asked, softer now. Mara blinked once, her voice steady as stone. "Because no one else was left to carry it." The wind moved through the yard, lifting dust around their boots. The recruits didn't speak. Even Riley's jaw was tight, his usual grin gone. Voss folded the uniform back into its wrapping with care he didn't know he had. He handed it to her without a word. She took it, tucked it into the bag, and zipped it shut. Then she bent, picking up the rest of her things, the notebook, the photo, the socks, and packed them neatly. When she stood again, her eyes met Voss's. Not defiant, not pleading, just calm. "Inspection complete, sir?" she asked quietly. Voss stepped back, his face unreadable. "Carry on." The line dispersed, boots crunching in the gravel, but the whispers didn't come back. Not that day, not the next. Later, when Mara sat alone on the barrack step polishing her scuffed boots, Riley passed by. He slowed, almost said something, then kept walking. The word had already spread across the base, the volunteer girl, the one with the general's name stitched in her bag. And though no one dared to mock her again, they all started watching her differently. Not like a joke, not even like a mystery. Like someone carrying a legacy too heavy for most men to lift. The door slammed open so hard it rattled the glass in its frame. Colonel Dane stormed into the briefing room, the silver on his collar flashing like lightning under the fluorescent lights. His boots struck the tile with clipped precision, each step heavy with anger he didn't bother to hide. Sergeant Voss snapped to attention before the colonel even spoke, the recruits freezing in a crooked line along the wall. Mara stood at the end, straight-backed, her duffel bag resting by her boots, sealed again but still damp with dust from the inspection yard. "Who authorized this uniform?" Dane barked, slamming a folder down on the table. Inside, photos of the uniform from the inspection, its stars, its nameplate, its ribbons, lay fanned out like evidence at a crime scene. Who in hell thought it was acceptable for a trainee to carry a general's colors on base? The room stayed silent. Voss's jaw twitched. He opened his mouth once, but no words came out. His confidence from earlier had evaporated, leaving him pale and tight-lipped. The colonel's glare swept across the line of recruits, pausing on each one before landing on Mara. "You," he said, pointing. "Ellison, step forward." Mara obeyed without hesitation. She came to attention, chin level, shoulders square, the way soldiers did who'd been watching discipline their entire lives. Her voice, when it came, was calm but carried an undercurrent of something deeper, a stillness that unnerved the others. "No one authorized it, sir," she said. "It belonged to my father." The colonel frowned. "Your father?" "Yes, sir. General Isaac Ellison." The name dropped into the air like a live charge. A few recruits flinched. Someone whispered, "No way," but no one dared laugh. The colonel's expression changed, first confusion, disbelief, then realization. His eyes widened, his breath caught in his throat, and for a moment the room seemed to shrink. "General Ellison," he repeated quietly, as if saying it summoned the ghost of the man himself. "Operation Kestrel." The silence thickened. Everyone at Fort Helridge knew the story, even if no one was supposed to speak of it. Kestrel had been one of NATO's most dangerous field operations, a classified mountain siege that turned into a rescue mission. Hundreds of soldiers had been trapped, only a handful made it out. Their leader, General Isaac Ellison, had gone missing in the blizzard that followed, presumed dead. His name was carved on memorials across 4 nations. The colonel swallowed hard. "That was your father." "Yes, sir," Mara said. "He never came home." Her voice didn't shake, but something in it pulled taut, like a thread that could break if touched. "After he was listed as missing, I applied through the volunteer corps. I didn't want sympathy. I wanted to finish what he started." Voss shifted his weight, looking anywhere but at her. The recruits behind him stood frozen. Mara's hands stayed at her sides, steady, unflinching. "I kept his uniform sealed," she continued, "not to parade it. It's the only thing I had left that reminded me who I was supposed to become." The colonel stared at her, speechless for a long moment. The hum of the ceiling lights filled the space where his words should have been. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, stripped of anger. "Your father was a good man," he said. "He trained half the officers in this command, including me." He took a step closer, studying her face as though trying to see traces of the man he'd once followed. "You've got his eyes," he said quietly. "Same calm when everything's falling apart." Mara didn't respond, she only nodded once. Voss finally cleared his throat. "Sir, I didn't know." "That's the point," Dane cut in sharply. "None of you knew who she was, and that's exactly how she wanted it." His gaze swept over the recruits. "While the rest of you were too busy running your mouths, this one was carrying more history in her bag than most of you will ever earn." He turned back to Mara. "You could have pulled rank, used the name." "I didn't earn it," she said. The colonel held her stare for a long time, then nodded. You just did. He dismissed the room with a curt wave. The recruits scattered, their boots shuffling against the floor, the air too heavy to speak in. Even Riley, usually first to joke, walked out in silence. Voss lingered a moment longer, the color drained from his face. He opened his mouth as if to apologize, but Mara was already turning away. When she stepped outside, the sun hit the compound in harsh, brilliant light. Dust swirled in the air, carried by the morning wind. She slung the duffel over her shoulder again, holding it close, the weight familiar and grounding. Behind her, the colonel stood at the doorway, watching her cross the yard with slow, deliberate steps. He remembered the last time he'd seen that uniform worn by a man walking into the mountains and never coming back. Now it was carried by his daughter, and somehow, it felt like a promise had survived. Everything shifted after the briefing room. The air in Fort Helridge felt heavier, quieter. The jeering that had filled the mornings vanished, replaced by an uneasy respect that followed Mara Ellison wherever she went. The recruits no longer laughed when she passed, they stood straighter. Even the instructors' barked orders softened when her name came up. It wasn't fear, not exactly, it was the gravity of realizing they had all mocked someone who had carried a legacy in silence. Mara didn't acknowledge any of it. She trained harder than before. While others dragged through morning drills, she was already lacing her boots before sunrise, her shadow long against the frost-bitten ground. Her movements were clean, efficient, each task done with the precision of someone who didn't have room for mistakes. The others began to time themselves against her, trying to keep pace with the rhythm she set: push-ups, sprints, rifle assembly, formation marches, but she always finished just ahead, never hurried, never winded. During weapons training, Sergeant Voss stood off to the side, clipboard in hand. He watched her field strip a rifle in under a minute, each piece aligned like it belonged to a ritual. When he called time, she looked up once, then set the weapon back together without breaking her focus. He didn't say a word. For the first time since her arrival, his silence wasn't condescension. It was respect he didn't know how to express. The barracks changed, too. The ones who had laughed Riley, Briggs, the loud ones, spoke less and listened more. In the evenings, when Mara sat polishing her boots or writing quietly in her worn notebook, no one interrupted. Once, Riley approached her with a ration pack in hand, mumbling that he had an extra. She didn't look up, just nodded. He set it on the edge of her bunk and left without another word. Small things, quiet things, the kind of apologies soldiers make without saying them. Then came the surprise inspection. Word spread at dawn, command was dropping in, full sweep, no warning. Within minutes, the compound was chaos. Cadets scrambled, boots half-laced, gear spilling out of lockers, voices shouting over each other. Someone knocked over a rack of rifles, another misplaced the logbook. Voss's orders were drowned by the noise. Mara stood in the center of the storm, still tying her hair back, her expression unreadable. When she saw Voss trying to organize two squads at once, she stepped forward without hesitation. "Form up by section," she said, her voice steady. The recruits turned toward her instinctively. "Alpha Squad, secure weapons locker. Bravo, clear the yard. No one moves gear without confirmation." Voss opened his mouth to object, but the cadets were already obeying. Within minutes, the noise collapsed into order. Lines reformed. Bags were zipped. The compound looked regulation-ready again by the time the inspection convoy rolled through the gates. Colonel Dane watched from the truck window, his eyes tracking her as she directed cleanup. He said nothing, but the faint curve of his jaw, the hint of approval, was hard to miss. When the officers finished their rounds and left, the base exhaled as one. Voss approached her, helmet tucked under his arm. "You just ran an inspection like you've done it 100 times, he said quietly. Mara looked past him, to the hills stretching beyond the wire. "Maybe I have," she said. Then she picked up a stray helmet, handed it to a cadet, and went back to work. By the end of the week, The evaluation board was updated. Names scrawled in neat rows, numbers beside them, scores, ranks, remarks. The recruits crowded around after dinner, searching for their placements. At the very top, under Command Potential, one name stood alone. Asterisk asterisk Ellison, M asterisk asterisk. Next to it, in black ink darker than the rest, someone had written by hand. Asterisk Leadership Inherited. No one asked who had written it. That night, the barracks was quieter than usual. The usual laughter, the arguments over gear, the soft guitar someone played after lights out gone. Mara sat on her bunk, notebook open, pen unmoving. Across the aisle, Riley leaned against his locker, whispering to another recruit. "You think she knew all along?" The other shook his head. "No, she didn't need to. You can't fake that kind of calm." They thought she couldn't hear, but she did. She closed the notebook and placed it beside her duffel, the same duffel that still held her father's folded uniform, sealed and untouched. For a moment her hand rested on it, the fabric cool beneath her fingers. Outside, wind rattled the flagpole, the sound low and steady, like a heartbeat echoing through the base. Mara lay back, eyes tracing the ceiling's faint cracks, the ghost of her father's words threading through her memory. Asterisk. This isn't a rank, it's a responsibility. Asterisk. The whispers faded one by one, replaced by the slow rhythm of sleep. But in that quiet, a new story was already taking root, not about the girl who'd been shamed, but about the one who'd carried a general's uniform into the mud and earned the right to wear it.